Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Thank you for being here with me today. So before we start with today's episode, I have some very exciting news. I am now on Spotify. So yes, I have finally taken the leap. I have an official podcast. It is still called A Cup with Elle. And no, I am not discontinuing this project that I currently have going on YouTube, but instead I will be uploading separate content in the podcast. So if you would like to check that out, I would put a link in the description box below, especially if podcast is more your thing. I personally like podcasts, especially since it's a good way to pass the time during very long commutes on the way home from work. And in this time, it is definitely something that I do not miss. I used to spend almost 4 hours per day commuting to and from work and or school or wherever, and sometimes it would take up 6 hours of my day just getting from one place to another. Very exhausting, and listening to podcasts is something that definitely helped me stay sane, I guess, and distract myself from all the white noise, but not exactly white noise. If you've been in traffic, then you know what I mean. So there's that. So for today, in today's episode, I would like to talk to you about overthinking. Who hasn't been there? It has definitely plagued a lot of us, and I have yet to meet a person who has not overthought in his or her life. Should I use there now as a pronoun? But just political correctness. So anyway, are you trapped by your own thoughts? Well then, let me share with you some ways to free yourself from overthinking. So I have here 5 things, and yes, I'm actually borrowing some of these things from an article that I saw online by CNN Health. So psychologist Kimber Shelton suggests or advises these 5 steps on breaking free from overthinking. So the first step, she says, is to become aware when you are overthinking. And I think that wow, I'm already overthinking. So the first step is to become aware. And guess what? That was me being aware. Yay for me, I guess. So whether it's being pointed out by someone else or you yourself, when you find yourself in that space, that is the first step. Because after all, if you're going to address an issue, the first step is always awareness. Second step is to take a step back and to gain some perspective. There's a saying that goes, actually, I do not know how the saying actually goes, so non verbatim, the things that you cannot control, you have to accept that you cannot control them. You have to realize what things you have some say over. For example, traffic, especially if you're a commuter, you don't own your own vehicle, then there's not much you can do. It's a systemic problem, and it's out of your hands. So why obsess over it? Why plague yourself telling yourself, oh no, I'm gonna be late, etc., etc., when you can just let it be and tell yourself, you know what, I cannot control the amount of traffic, but I can use this experience to make better decisions for next time. Which brings us to step 3. If there is something in your situation that you can't control, the next step is to isolate the singular problem. So narrow it down. Think of what it is in your current situation that you can change, that you can affect, that you can redirect. And after you have identified that issue, you have to set a limit on how long you're going to give yourself to problem solve. That is step 4. And Serrani says that, oh yeah, Kimber Serrani, that's confusing. I thought we are talking about Kimber Shelton. Ah, Deborah Serrani, a psychologist and senior adjunct faculty at the Gordon F. Derner Institute of Advanced Psychological Studies at Adelphi University in Garden City, New York. So, she says, so Deborah Serrani says that it's important not to slip into problem dwelling, which is not productive. So, problem dwelling, this is when you just, well, literally dwell in your problem and you just think and overthink and turn it over and over in your head, thinking about how everything is gonna go wrong, creating anxiety for yourself unnecessarily. And instead of dwelling on that, it's better to problem solve, especially if it's out of your hands and there's nothing you can do about it, especially at that moment. I'm not saying let it go, but you know, it's just it's out of your hands. So what else can you do? And then lastly, the final step is to recognize the baby steps you took forward, solving your problem even if you weren't able to solve it completely. So let's just take the whole traffic situation. So let's say you're stuck in a traffic situation, heavy traffic situation, it's out of your control, you're late for a meeting, and instead of dwelling in the problem in the issue, why not think of how you can solve it? Can you actually do something about it? I remember one time, there I was stuck in incredibly heavy traffic, and the bus driver made wrong decisions one after another, and he I basically ended up in a parking lot in a highway. So I decided, okay, not gonna work for me because I have my students waiting. It is exams week and I cannot afford to be late. So I got down the bus. I walked, I think I walked a kilometer, and then I got on another vehicle, and then I got to my job. Problem solving. And if it's something that you really are stuck in and you cannot control over it, you have no control over it, then perhaps think of how you can avoid the situation for next time. So again, with the whole traffic situation, I used to have to go to work after attending classes in the university. So I would attend class early in the morning, and then I would commute during lunch hour, and then be at work, and then just eat my lunch there. So what I did was take the average of how long the commute would take if I would take the bus, and it was not very favorable. So I found this app where you can hire a motorcycle driver, and that's what I did for the longest time. I'd be at work in 20 minutes on average, which gave me enough time to eat lunch before my students would arrive. So of course I wouldn't have lunch with me, so I would have to buy lunch, and that is something that I also had to take account for, delivery time or having to go buy lunch myself. So that, and you have to recognize, even if you are not able to problem solve the problem that you were in, you have to pat yourself in the back and recognize that you did something, and you did something, and that counts, it matters, right? So yeah. So in other times when you recognize that you are already in that space, you're overthinking, and instead of allowing yourself to spiral, why not give yourself a few minutes and just let your brain take you where it needs to go? Because that is also a healthy thing, instead of bottling everything up or shoving everything under the rug. Give yourself some time, but set a limit. and tell yourself, okay, I'm going to think about this, but I'm not gonna dwell on it, and then I'm gonna give myself 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, or if you need more time, I'm gonna give myself a day, and then that would be it. Starting tomorrow, it's all about problem solving and taking the next steps. You can also engage in some relaxing self care activities, such as taking a nice long bath, maybe listening to music. And if that is not your thing, how about journaling or making lists? And maybe something useful like a pros and cons list, right? You can also try reading or walking, especially if you an overactive thinker, not necessarily an overthinker, but something who's almost always actively thinking about something. Then try something, an activity that will not let your independent thoughts run wild, but something that's engaging. I personally binge a lot, especially when I'm trying to distract myself from things that I do not want to be thinking about. I think lately, instead of lying down in bed thinking about the things that haunt me, and I've mentioned this in a lot of my episodes, I'm still grieving over the death of my mother. And so when I find myself in that space and I know that it's gonna give me nightmares or it's gonna make me stay up all night, I would pull up my phone even though I'm very sleepy and I do not need that blue light hurting my eyes even more. I would pull up some random manga online and just start reading so that it takes me elsewhere and that it puts me to sleep. So, so yeah, there's that. I'm not sure if that is 100% healthy, but that is how I am coping with things right now. So, what about you? What are the things that you do when you are overthinking? Or is it something that you still need to work on? And speaking of working on that, if you find yourself overthinking for weeks or months on end, you may want to consider seeking professional help. Nothing wrong with that. And we there is a thing known as or called generalized anxiety disorder. This is a very common experience, especially during this time, because of the pressure that we have and the life changes, the deaths left and right, and the very alarming news, worldwide news everywhere. And overthinking can also be triggered by trauma, whether past trauma or present trauma. So there's that. And seeking professional help is always advisable. There's nothing embarrassing about it. And if you do think that you need that, why not? So that's it from me today. Again, thank you for hanging out. Do like and subscribe if you like my content, and do check out my new podcast on Spotify, still called A Cup with Elle. So this has been Elle. Bye, guys.